Hi, this is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpit Queen, and I'm here with Ruthie Landis, who has been hit by the wind. As you can see, she's from the Windy City, Chicago. So the hat's just stellar. It's stellar. I love the fan. I love it all. We have so much fun on the Book and Film Club dressing up. I know, the wind.
They were always,
On the
they
shore.
were, no, they were always wiping themselves off. How many?
The dust. And Lillian Gish in the movie, The Wind, she'd nibble when she met the man on the train. I thought, who eats like that? Who eats like that?
Letty.
Here we are tonight with Robert Gwaltney, my co-host, and Kathy Ramsberger has joined us tonight because she just finished watching the film. And, I was trying to do this 1928 hairdo with my long hair. Very interesting. But I did it in like 5 seconds. I felt like Cher at a concert. So, Ruthie, priceless. I know. We're going to have fun tonight. So, Robert,
Yes.
this was initially your idea to pick this silent movie classic. And I have to tell you, I love silent movies. Have you ever seen the one about the man in the moon, the very first film that they ever had?
Yes.
That's one of my favorite ones in the world because it was kind of stop animation type thing. Mm-hmm. But this film, the way they did the train and the wind was pretty phenomenal for 1928. What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I could not believe it. But my favorite part about the whole film, for those of you out there in Filmland that haven't seen it, my favorite part was the names of the characters. I mean, we've got Sourdough, we've got Lidge, we got Wirt. I mean, where do these, I've never even heard these names before in my life. And I was just, every time they'd introduce a new character and they'd say his name is Wirt, I'm going, I'm sorry, I'm having costume malfunction with my headscarf. But anyway, I'm trying to do when she was first on the train, when she was going out to Sweetwater, Texas, to join her beloved Beverly, who was a guy. Beverly, she grew up, her mammy raised her in Beverly, and they were just so lovey-dovey. I don't blame the wife one bit for getting upset looking in there, and she's just like kissing him all over the face.
Oh, I say, Cora, get over it, girl.
I just want to kill you. I just want to kill you.
Well, she had a nasty disposition. Of course, anyone's going to look lovely next to Cora.
Yeah. Well, and come on, poor Cora, slicing up those guts and the meat and everything. Gee.
I mean, there was an entire carcass hanging from the ceiling.
And what was the organ that she pulled out that she was examining?
Intestines.
For a long time.
It was like intestines.
Are you sure it wasn't a stomach or something?
Yeah, sure. All that
like a stuff. Tube hanging off of it. I was literally, lost my appetite watching this film. And the fact that when she was eating her little, whatever she was eating, those little nibbles, and then the wind blows open and she gets all her food dirty, and they're constantly the dirt. There's no point at this point, when the door piled up with so much sand when the northern came through, I was thinking, good Lord, who would want to live in Sweetwater, Texas? Oh, I'm going to go live in my precious, was it her cousin?
Yeah, her cousin.
Her cousin's fabulous ranch. And I'm thinking, fabulous. The wind was blowing through the cracks. It was even the bed, when he went to dust it off, it was just clouds of dust were coming up. And I was just going, yeah, I'm glad I live in East Texas, y'all. I did.
So she washed the dishes with dirt.
Yes, pretty much.
No, she
And then
did that one scene. She she had a thing of dirt and she washed the dishes with dirt.
Like soft scrub.
my favorite was the water basin and pitcher that they had back in the day. And she throws the dirt on the ground in the basin and then pours the water in. And I kept thinking it's got to be muddy because it would have gotten in the pitcher too. And she's like trying to freshen up. And I'm just thinking, and then he makes her that bitter coffee. I'm telling you, I am happy, even that we live in the time of COVID, that I am here with my French press coffee maker. And I don't have to worry about it being so bad that she had to throw the coffee into the wash basin when he wasn't looking, because she couldn't, even with sugar in it, she couldn't even.
Right.
Well, that other guy, that she wouldn't marry, he warned her that he was a better cook than Liege.
Liege.
Right.
What kind of name is Liege?
I don't know, but you know this. So this film was actually based on a novel by the same name, written by, let's see, what was her name? Oh my gosh, written by Dorothy Scarborough. So it was a novel written in 1925 and adapted for the screen in 1928. And The Wind actually was one of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's final silent pictures. You know, the talkies were coming into play, and it wasn't critically well received initially, but it was only later, you know, in history that it was regarded as a masterpiece and one of Lillian Gish's greatest silent film roles.
Yeah, I mean, I was so surprised. I knew it had to be later because it really wasn't overacted at all. I mean, it was a lot of it was very understated, except for the wind and the hat. And when she I was thinking when she was going to take off her hat, it didn't even have a little tie underneath.
How did she keep the hat on her head?
It was bullshit. It was bullshit.
Velcro.
Glued, because there's
it
no
was like
way.
glued on. But then at that one moment, she just takes her hat off.
Yeah.
There's not even pins in there. There's nothing.
No.
And she never even touched it during the whole thing. She never held it on.
There was so that actually was one of the critics actually stated the whole hat thing, like, was that really the best hat for The Wind? But I think that
because it kept flapping up and down.
Well, I think that they chose it because of the movement, but what they should have done is strapped it, and she should have been holding on to it.
Yes, I mean, a person would do that, right?
Right.
Yes.
The scarf was blowing.
But they weren't wanting her to obstruct her face, I suppose. So that was a bit problematic. It didn't totally throw me out.
No.
But yeah, I was wondering the same thing. I'm thinking, good Lord, that's one heck of a hat pin.
Yes, right. Stuck right into the scalp.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
So
I had not seen this silent film, and I actually watched it twice because I couldn't quite believe it was the saddest plot I've ever heard in my life. I mean, she goes out there expecting utopia, and she gets out there to see her beloved childhood pal and cousin, and then the wife is just like, ugh, and then the children love her.
Of course they love Letty.
I mean, Letty, oh my gosh.
She's lovely.
She was
tiny little thing.
She was just so innocent and tiny and petite. And she kissed the Cora, and Cora's like, you know, what are you doing? And which was the wife of her cousin, and her, so they welcome him, they get to the ranch, she meets this nefarious character on the, you know, some kind of salesman or something who travels the roads, and he's hitting on her. And I thought, even back then, that you got these old guys hitting on young girls.
I know, but that was another point. Like, so I thought, you know, like the acting was surprisingly subtle, and, you know, they accomplished a lot by those slides with the words, and then sometimes you saw them mouthing words, but they didn't say it. But she had really mastered not overacting. And I think that's why she was able to segue into sound film, which the other actors were, all over the top. But I have to say that was, there were a couple things. There's no backstory. You don't know why she got on the train to Virginia. She seemed like she was a pauper, like she was homeless and didn't have
She
a place
seemed
to
like
go.
she'd been suddenly left alone in the world. And so she was going to her cousins because that's all she had. And, she just had that little valise suitcase, she didn't bring much with her. And she didn't have any money. She was destitute. And then she was at the mercy of all these guys. First, the two guys that show up to pick her up at the train. But I've got to go back to mentioning the train again. The way the train was coming across the West Texas plains with the dust rolling, that cinematography was
beautiful.
It was
beautiful. And the way they handled the wind hitting the panes of that, they must have had one of those cyclonic fans going.
So you know how they did that?
How did they do that?
8 airplane propellers.
Well, that explains why a couple of times she was almost knocked off her feet.
Yeah, and they filmed it. Was it the Mojave Desert, where the coolest it got was 120 degrees. And so there's this interview with Lillian Gish many years later, who's introducing the film, and she's talking about the fact that everyone had to wear goggles, and they had scarves across their faces. She said it was the most miserable filming experience that she's ever had as an actress. She remembered one particular time where it was so hot, she went to go open a vehicle and left some of her hand flesh on the metal of the handle because it had gotten so hot in the desert.
Oh my God. And Beverly was going to be a dead duck pretty soon, didn't you think? He had this cough. I mean, if you're not
tuberculosis or whatever was wrong with him,
inhaling the wind, they're inhaling all that dirt, the dirt, the dandruff and the dirt. Anyway, I need to say that your hair, first of all, Kathy, is perfect, because I thought her hair was more like me, like Mike.
Oh, and then she just let it down.
And she just let it down like
that. Clear down to her like
that was a gorgeous moment, though.
Clear down to her knee. See, now I'm really pulling a Lillian Gish.
That's it. And I thought, oh, Kathy's going to pull that at our time. She's going to pull it down, because that was so shocking. I thought, it was that little short do that they did in the 20s, but no.
Well, I have to tell you, you really had to wear underpants back then.
And they didn't. They wore those bloomers, those drawstring bloomers.
Just on a good day, all the chafing.
Well, they had a lot of shots of Liege's butt. Did you happen to know that? They would catch his butt in a lot of the shots. And I was interested in that moment.
It was played by Lars Hansen.
I know.
And he was handpicked by Lillian Gish. So it's funny because Lillian Gish signed a very lucrative contract in 1925 with MGM, and she was allowed the opportunity to actually take projects and present them. There was like the Scarlet Letter, there was The Wind. Was it Irving Thalberg, I think, that she was working directly with at the time? And of course, she had a lot of creative license, which was pretty unheard of then. So when she wanted to do the Scarlet Letter, she actually took the novel and wrote a series of like a 4-page outline of how she thought the script should be written. Wow. They actually adapted the script to her notes.
She was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And she was so tiny. I mean, when she went to that dance where they had the cyclone hit, and what was crazy about it is like the church bell fell through the roof with timbers, and they go, well, coast is clear. We can all go back in and resume the dance. And I'm just going, holy smokes. And okay, here's another question for all of you. How did they get all those people down that storm? Have you ever been in a storm cellar? I mean, I come from Kansas. Storm cellars maybe hold, a family. But this one was
Right.
putting down 50, 60, 70 people. And I'm going, how did that happen? And, you know,
Well, it was the
because
Northerns.
also
Oh,
they stored their roots, you know, their root vegetables down there and apples and things to keep it cool and smoked meats and stuff. And I'm thinking, how did they get, and they just kept rolling down the steps. And then that,
it was
one
kind of like
guy-
one of those phone booths from the 50s, you know.
yeah, and the
Yes,
cowboy,
yes, or were those little Volkswagens and 20 people come out of the Volkswagen?
Right.
I did that. Don't laugh.
yeah, I
Oh,
got a
Lord.
Volkswagen and I did
I would have
that.
been
20
too
people in a
claustrophobic.
VW bug.
I did the same thing, but I was wondering, then the poor guy couldn't get down the steps, and then he saw her with was the guy the salesman Wirt?
Yeah, word.
Weren't Rudy or something like that?
Wirt?
Word Roddy.
Roddy. Yeah, he was rotten.
He
Yeah,
was
Roddy.
rotten.
He was.
He got what was coming.
So wait a minute. Okay, so now I have to say, okay, so we came up with a backstory. We filled in the gaps. Okay.
Yes.
Now here's the thing. And yes, who would ever go settle there? Like, what were they thinking? And what possibly could they grow? What were they thinking? But
There were cattle, man, and you could sell them $3 a head.
did you see what happened to the horses and the cattle though? They're dead ducks.
They got too much
Man,
dirt in their lungs, and they just collapsed and withered away on the plains.
I know, except that one carcass, she got one of them carcasses there.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I thought, what Lillian Gish might have been interested in the story was, you just said it, where you said she was amazingly powerful for a woman in Hollywood. She was amazingly powerful. And she chose a character to play that from a woman's point of view had no power. She was completely powerless, right?
Completely vulnerable and the mercy and kindness of strangers. Yeah.
And even her allowing Wirt to
I'm sorry. People out there listening, don't name a kid Wirt. It's close to
No.
Wart, you know. Wirt, it's just worst word I've ever heard. Wirt, I've never heard that.
well, anyway, she let him so close in her space. Like that, you know, like, would a woman, like, you know, that ate like that?
Was that because they were doing a film? Because, you know, in movies, people always get into that.
Well, you know,
Well,
I kind of had the sense that Letty, you know, had no sense of physical
Boundaries. That's what I was trying to say. Like, she was not only like helpless, but she really was so naive.
Yeah.
And she didn't have physical boundaries. Like, now it wasn't just the staging, because Kathy, they did plenty of 2 shots where they would do the 2 shot and then they'd cut to the other person and cut to the other person. So they did not have to stage him on top of her. She just met the man, you know? So that was so interesting. And then of course, here comes this, you know, squaw, and they're all going to want to marry her, right? And her naivete about that as well. And yet she wouldn't sleep with Leach. Like, she had that moment of empowerment around
I mean,
him.
my God, what a horrible kisser. I mean, he was just masher. That's the only word I can say. He was a masher. He was just like.
But could you imagine that?
Suffocating.
He was very striking. There were moments where his eyes looked translucent. So I can't imagine how blue they must have been in person.
Yeah, I think he was handsome. And you could even tell in the first storm when he helped her up onto the thing that, oh, this guy's a good looking guy compared to Wirt. But
Yeah.
I want to just say,
Compared
that-
to sourdough.
yes, the other guy, Porridge, what was his name? The other one?
So they're sourdough. So we'll say
Sourdough.
sourdough.
So
Or-
she let them into her space, but then at that moment, like she found it in her to say no, in a way that she kind of wasn't so able to do with Wirt. And I wonder what that was about, because because the conflict was that in a way there were two antagonists. One was Wirt and one was the wind,
But he
right?
was older, and so therefore he had more authority.
Yes.
Back in the day, and a grown-up, an adult, when they said something, you paid attention. She saw, I think, Liege more as her peer,
Here.
where the other guy was in a position of authority. He was a businessman. He was riding the train. He showed her a kindness by bringing her the food, and of all things to eat, a banana.
No, it was so obvious.
Where did they get a banana?
From that goofy guy they threw the food at.
I know, but I'm just thinking, are bananas like plentiful in 19,
In
whatever.
Sweetwater, Texas? I don't think so.
No. And I want to ask you, wasn't the guy, I really think so, that the guy on the train who served the fruit, was that Buster Keaton? Early young Buster Keaton?
Oh, I don't know. It doesn't.
I
not
don't
come across
think
that.
so. I think I recognize Buster Keaton. I don't think that was him. But he threw,
I
I thought,
do.
who throws food at a person working on a train as a selling? I thought, and nobody acted like it was a big deal. They just threw all the food at him, and he just jumped up and I don't think he ever paid him, did he?
It didn't seem so.
But yeah, I'll tell you, that thing about the banana is odd, because my mother told me when she was a little girl, which was, quite a, it was after 1928, because it was, into the, when she was a little girl, she was probably in the late 30s, but they got for Christmas every year an orange. That was like the greatest gift, was an orange. So why they had, I think it was.
Well, they were coming from Virginia. They were coming
Well, how
from.
many bananas are growing in Virginia? Sorry.
Yeah, it's come to Virginia, the banana country.
Oh no. We get off on the weirdest tracks when we
Oh,
talk.
anyway, just to keep this thing going, then so she stands up to Liege, and then and then she empowers herself,
Yeah,
kills Wirt.
because I won't ever touch you again. And
And-
you could tell he meant it. I'm not, you're my new bride, but you spurn me, I will never touch you again. And then somewhere along the line, I guess because of her circumstances, she falls in love with him. It's crazy.
Well, she falls dependent on him, and she kills Wirt. I mean, she kills Wirt and drags him out there, and
Which is
that was all. It was very impressive, and her digging his grave was very impressive.
And then
Okay.
she looks out the window, and the wind's blown all the dirt she buried him in off. So there's his face and that hand.
Yeah.
And then I was a little confused, because I watched it twice, is when her husband comes home and he goes, well, they say here in the, out here on the plains, that when the sand comes through, it washes away all the, if he was an evil man and by a good person, then they just disappear. And I think, what happened to poor Wirt? Did he blow away?
Well, I think there's sort of a supernatural sort of metaphoric thing happening.
Oh, there was the whole time with the wind, with the cyclone. It was like, these were all like apocalyptic things for this young woman who had gone out to seek, what she thought was going to be a wonderful life. And she gets out there, and the wind is like a monster. I mean, it's like after her. I mean, every time she looks out the window, you could just tell she was totally, I think I'd be freaking out, especially when the windows started busting out, and she starts, and then the lamp falls over and catches on fire. And smart little girl, she put it out. She stuffed the blankets in the window. I think it's the old adage that we're stronger than we think.
Yes.
She was playing this little Virginia, I don't know, Southern belle, but a belle, type of, proper young lady. And then she goes out there and she found out, by God, he's going to threaten me and come after me. She just
she found her power. That was the arc. That was the arc.
But that's not the original ending.
Really? What's the original?
Yeah. So the original ending is much bleaker. But they made them.
They moved to Lubbock.
Right now,
that's really funny to me because I drove through Lubbock moving to Texas during an ice storm. And I call it the armpit of Texas because I've never seen such tragedy in my life. The ice was this thick. I couldn't stop. And I was creeping along, pulling a trailer, moving to Texas during this blizzardy ice storm. And literally every car would pass me and then they just roll like 8 times out into a pasture. And I couldn't go, oh, geez, there went another. I saw 8 cars.
And did you see?
They went from the wind to the ice.
Yeah, it was the ice.
I was
and
like,
did you go, Auntie M, help me.
Kathy was a modern day Letty.
Yeah, I was driving.
So the original ending, she kills Wirt, and in this fit of madness, and she wanders out into the desert to her own death.
I thought so. That's what I thought she was going to do when she ran out the door and she was up against the barn and all this. I thought the girl's going to die. I thought
it would have been kind of Dr. Zhivago-y, except
I actually that's the book version, Robert?
Yes. So it ended much darker, and Lillian Gish and all the rest of them thought that was how they wanted to poetically end the film. Of course, MGM, they believed that it needed a much happier ending, and so they went back months later with much expense to rebuild the sets and to film the alternate ending, and that's the version that you see on screen.
Do you know how long they took to film that movie?
No, I don't know the duration. I don't know how long it would have taken to film up.
Well, they whipped them out pretty fast.
Yeah.
But
so did she and Leach have some little babies? Little wind babies?
No, well, she went on her, after she kills Wirt, she's a goner.
Well, I don't ever think she slept with anybody. I mean, according to the movie.
But I think she and Cora had something going on, but that's just a guess.
Well, I want to say one more thing about when you were talking about the mystical and maybe an overlay. So do you remember the very first slide that introduced that came on to introduce the story? Do you remember what that was about?
Was it the horse in the sky?
Well, the horse in the sky, no, it was about man conquering nature.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Oh.
Yeah, and in the end, you can't.
You can't. And I, of course, because it struck me with what's going on right now, with our climate and all this stuff, that we still think we can conquer nature. And so when you say, oh, when these people went there and settled there, like this human hubris or whatever that thinks that they can conquer nature, and of course they can't, right? And
Brithian, I think they also can't conquer human nature as well.
Yes, I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
It will be 100 years since 1925 is when they feel it'll be 100 years, and you think about how far we've come with technology and everything, but as far as human relationships, has a lot changed?
No, I don't.
No, not at all. There's
an altered awareness and value to diversity than there once had been, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe that people dynamics, I don't know that have changed that terribly much.
Yeah, they certainly were not diverse. That northern, although that one guy, was he a Native American or Spanish? Maybe. Remember that one guy
Yeah.
that came in that whole blanket? You know what I'm saying? Who he
Right.
was? Yeah.
Well,
That
that
was
would have
the
been
only
indicative
diverse.
of West Texas, because there's a lot of people that came up from Mexico. There's a lot of Spaniard, Mexican people. So that makes sense. I mean, the big haciendas were out in West, far West Texas. And so that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, but
that was the only diverse. There was not, they were all the same.
Yeah.
well, they may have been all the same, but maybe the diversity people were smart enough not to go out to West Texas to
That's right.
raise cattle in. She said, oh, I'll be glad when it stops. And he goes, it doesn't. The only thing that happens is we get them worse. When the Great Northern comes in, all that's left is your arms and your legs.
Right. But look on the good side. You always have flawless skin.
Because you're exfoliating. You're always exfoliating.
I just
right.
wonder, I was looking at her when she was washing the dishes and she had that dirty sleeve, and I thought, could you ever really get clean?
No.
Well, it was dirt. There was no, I mean, she had those 3 plates, and I think when he said soft scrub, but she was washing them with dirt because I guess that would get the grease off and whatever. And then I thought, oh, so now she'll have another basin with water in it or something, but she didn't. She took a towel and she wiped them off. I mean, maybe that's fiber. I don't know, that they were eating the dirt.
Well, I read a lot of Little House on the Prairie books, and I don't remember them washing dishes with dirt, but
Yeah, well, I don't think they had the wind issues though. I don't know what, even they were, and dirt was so plentiful.
I really felt sorry.
resourceful. These are resourceful people.
They are.
If
Look
all
at
you
all
got
this
is
dirt.
and sand, that's how you wash your dishes.
Okay, so what was the white horse?
Well, that basically was, the West. It's wild, it's free. And it was kind of like it was symbolism of not being able to tame. You think about all the wild horses that have
Well,
run
see,
across this country. Go
I
ahead.
thought that the horse was like Indian folklore, that it was the
Yeah,
wind.
it was.
Right? Yeah.
It was Indian folklore, but where does all those stories come from? They come from generations of passing on, making up stories of trying to explain their world. And so that's what, but she was definitely into that. And then have any of you ever ridden a horse? Yeah, me too. And I grew up around horses and everything. And the way she rode that horse, she just kept falling off. And I think, God, that had to hurt, because I mean, she was on the back of him, and how she fell off hanging on to him. Still, I can see her trotting away.
I was thinking, girl, if you can keep that hat on your head, surely you can stay on a horse.
Really? And oh, that poor little thing. But again, she was stronger than you thought. But it makes me want to go watch some more Lillian Gish films, honestly, because she was subtle. She appeared totally innocent. I mean, when that work guy was coming on to her on the train, I mean, she was kind of looking at him like, she gave him kind of the eye, and I was trying to figure out where he was going. Was he going to the bathroom?
Well, surely they didn't have bathrooms.
I mean, how many doors do you have on a train? Where do you go to?
Right. I don't know.
He was opening a door. I'm thinking, you can't go out.
Maybe it was the VIP section.
It was probably a hole that that's the way they'd go in India. They just have a toilet seat, and you just go, and it just goes down the track.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I hate to tell you, in China. Now, not to be not classy here, but in China, the worst of all, because you have no toilet paper. I mean, there is paper. You kind of bring your own paper, toilety paper with you, but there are just garbage cans. There's no way that the sewer systems in China can take that. Now, in fancy hotels, they have some, you can use toilet paper, but mostly where you are. But the worst of all was that we were in a bus and we pulled over because I had to go to the bathroom so bad. And it was a trough, and you put one foot on one side of this tile trough and then your other one, and the person behind you is squatting behind you, and you're squatting behind the other person.
Oh, I can go one step further. I had a friend that went to Africa, and it was on I think it was on a Rotary mission, Goodwill mission and everything. And they went out to give the shots, the polio shots. And she was one of the one picked. And she said, Kathy, you're going along. And I had to go. And they said, oh, coming up, there's not a shed, but a thatched, thing. Yeah. You go in there. And she said it was a concrete slab. And she goes, and I had eaten something that did not do well with me. And I went in there and there's it's just flat, but there's like stuff. And so she said she just had to squat and go. And she looks, when she looks around, there's no toilet paper or anything. Oh. She's just going, oh my God. And she looks over and there's a guy right beside her doing this thing. And she goes, I was so mortified.
She's like, the pork, you ate the pork too.
You ate the pork too. But my husband lived in Africa, in Ghana, for 2 years. And even though he had a nice place and he had actually a houseboy that they provided for him, he was a teacher. All he had in the back was no concrete. It was a hole. It was just a hole in the ground. That's all it was. And it did have like a little, so if it was raining, it did have like a little roof over it, but no, that would be it. So you see, we all live in, we're so spoiled, really.
We are, extremely. And why is it that our conversations always lead to the outhouse?
Because we want to know. We want to know, where was Wirt going when he went through the door?
Really?
I'm going, where's he going? I just couldn't figure it out. I don't think they had bathrooms on the trains back then. So there was too many questions for me watching this show. There was questions about throwing food at the waiter and how she fell off the horse when she was hanging on to him for dear life.
And the hat.
The hat was probably
that was why I had to wear a hat,
because that had to have been super glued on her head to stay on. and really, you think about that. How did they keep it on her head if they've got airplane?
Marveled. I mean, that thing had to have been bobby pinned in. I mean, it was.
Well, I think what they did was they put like a hair net over her head, and then they attached it to the hairnet. Now, then they cut, if you look at that one time when she takes off the hat.
Her hair's just perfect.
I know. But of course, it was a moment when she took it off where there was no wind. There was no wind. So I kind of also thought that the white horse was kind of the angel of death in a way, because I don't think, even though it seemed like there was a happy ending for Letty, I just don't see it as really a happy ending.
I really thought she was going to, when she walked out into the storm, she was going to just wander off and die. And that would have been a satisfying ending for me, because if I went through all that, I'd want to die too, because I would want to go back to Old Ledge.
And I didn't know whether when she took the gun, she was going to shoot him or her. I didn't know whether she might commit suicide. I really, because what she was going crazy, and the guy worked, told her, "You're going to go crazy. You're going to go crazy."
It makes you wonder where his wife was. His wife back in Virginia, you suppose? Yeah, I think so too.
But the
Natalie,
only other
you've
thing,
been so silent. Oh, she's been so silent on this silent movie. What was your takeaway from watching this film?
I thought the language was interesting. No, I'm kidding.
Was aren't it, you know, that when they spell out, I've heard of Texas draws, but there was Texas language in there I've never heard before. What was that aren't? And I thought, aren't you gonna? It was weird, but go ahead.
Well, it first of all, the one thing I want to say is that I think that it spoke to the condition of women who had no, their husband died, or their husband divorced them, or their husband beat them, or whatever, and they had no recourse. And it's interesting the timing of the movie, and what was happening with women's suffrage. So I think it was making a statement about that. The other part of it is that I thought the wind was not realistic, okay, but I think we've advanced in civilization in good ways and bad ways. But the good ways make us forget that in 1925, they're really, I mean, I went to my grandmother's outhouse in South Carolina for a good 10 years, until 1967, maybe. And they finally put in a bathroom. And that was in South Carolina. So and don't even get me started on Africa and China and bathrooms. Adult diapers, that's my tip. But the rest of the world is still very much like that in places.
yeah,
And the condition of women is too, and the condition of anybody that's different is too. So I loved what it had to say about today.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and the women's issue, but also the man versus nature, and the feeling I can conquer it, it won't conquer me. But
What's
it was
on
gonna,
your hand?
huh?
Waving those scissors for?
I don't know. I just don't know.
You're like
I'm
her
looking,
ready in her
I'm
day.
looking for words. I want to find words.
Do you know that my grandmother, that was her time? And my grandmother was so independent as a woman. I mean, she ran the show with my grandfather and her. They were real entrepreneurs. And she was nothing like Letty. She was the one riding out on the horses to go get the cattle, you know. And she did. My grandfather and my grandmother rode their horses everywhere. That's how they went to town. And but then the next generation, the women kind of almost went backwards, because my mother was very much a 50s housewife. You know, the pumps, the pearls, you know, the cinch waist dress, and always everything just home ec perfect on the table, the salad, the portions and all this stuff. And I think then they get to our generation, which for me, it was my time where I came into that age was the 70s. And I think we were on the cusp of, good Lord, after the 60s. 60s, I was a kid, but the 70s, it was like, oh, women's lib and Gloria Steinem, and we were going to change the world. And all I saw our generation end up doing was doing the same, still doing all the things that our mothers did, but now having a full-time job or maybe two and juggling all those balls. So personally, I think my grandmother's time was probably a better time to, as far as women making movement forward. And my daughters now, well, nobody's going to tell them what to do. They have got it figured out. And are you guys seeing the same type of theme with your generations of family members? I mean, I don't know. Did your grandparents have an outhouse? Mine did. Two-holer. They were uptown.
When my mother was a little girl for a brief period of time, she recalls an outhouse and having to take a stick with her, and you would bang around to make sure that there were no critters in there.
Death of those things. I would
Have
just
it.
not, I would hold it and hold it, not wanting to use it, but eventually you have to.
It's as awful as a porta potty. Those are awful.
My grandparents didn't really have a whole lot of plumbing out at their farm. And my Aunt Edith never did have indoor plumbing. She always had an outhouse. So I didn't think anything of it. I can go anywhere. I mean, I can go on a slab, bother me, say, hey, buddy, it wouldn't bother me. But I do think that we have a lot of things that we do take for granted now that have subtly changed and made our lives for the better, like appliances and wash machines. My other grandmother was a washerwoman. She took in laundry, and she had these aluminum square tanks on these things with a wringer at the end. And she had the washing, and then she had the bluing, and she ironed everything that she washed after she hung it on the line. And I think, oh my God, if I had to wash my clothes out by hand and wring them out and put them on a line. The one time I did that, I had a wasp sting me in the middle of the night that was in my sheets. I said, forget that. Who wants fresh sheets when you got a wasp in them? That was that big surprise. So, we have a nostalgia for those were simpler times. They're pretty bad. I mean, the Sears catalog came because that was your toilet paper for the year, one catalog. And you definitely wanted the Sears Christmas one because
They didn't call it the wish book for nothing.
And they use corn cobs too.
Oh.
I mean, how did we get off on this track?
Good times. I don't know. But so there's this scholarly document that I was perusing earlier that was just making some interesting comments and about the film. So it says, when Letty's resistance breaks down, the wind too changes dramatically. As it plays about her, molding the skirts to her slim body, we experience the lightheaded feeling that a nightmare has recently been exorcised. It is not the same wind that evoked Letty's opening exclamation. It gently enfolds her body now. It is almost as if though her own transformation, it too, were subtly changed. It's one of the strangest victories in cinema.
What that reminds me of is before you learn how to swim. I mean, you fight the water, you fight it and you fight it. And then one day something clicks and you realize, hey, I'm quit working against the water. I mean, we float, work with it. And that's kind of what happened. She had this amazing transformation. And I think that's what they were kind of doing by the changing of the ending. But just the thought of her still with Lidge today just makes me sad.
Well,
and there's this interesting thing too that I had not considered. But it says, the story is given through the mind of the homesick, frightened girl who sees everything distorted to a certain extent. Although the ending creates the impression that to a certain extent, the story has unfolded in Letty's mind, the oppressive bleakness and the unearthly metaphysical quality of the film are too impressive to be so easily disavowed.
I was going to say, so is the wind real? Or is there all...
Is she an unreliable narrator?
Right, exactly. And in Hebrew, the word ruach, which means spirit, also means wind.
Really?
Yeah.
And don't we all have the tendency, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but it happens to me all the time. Don't we tend to write our own story about things? We have a perception about something, and then we experience it, and we kind of still have that misperception of And so it takes a while to kind of figure out what is really truth. That's why when people write memoirs, you know, a memoir is just the way a person remembers it. It doesn't mean it's completely fact. It doesn't mean that it's completely false. It just means that's the person's story. So Letty came in with this innocent little Virginia background and raising up with a mammy and her cousin Beverly. Beverly. That's just so bizarre. So, and then where in the heck he ever met Cora is beyond me.
One of those dances.
Ye gads. But
she rang his bell and it fell right.
That carcass. That was so, and those little children, you know, just oh goodness.
So what did you call the wind, Ruthie? What was the name?
Ruach is spirit or wind. Yeah.
Ruthie, you are the ruach beneath my wings.
Oh, that's my song. My Bette Midler song, my favorite Bette Midler song.
Good song.
Oh my gosh.
I love that. So that's real, I would say would be the song for the number 2 on the Enneagram, is that they're the wind under other people's wings. And they have to, in order to transform, say, you know what, I need a little ruach myself, you know, I need a little wind for myself so I can soar too. And that's the, you know, the growth trajectory for the 2. So, you know, that it always resonated with me for that reason. Yeah. Yeah.
But what about the soundtrack? Do you guys remember it?
Okay.
It was so surprising to me.
Okay. So I have to talk about the soundtrack. I'm so glad you brought that up. So I just made this series of videos, which I haven't, it is on my YouTube channel, but they haven't been released yet. And they're really fun. And they're 12 videos about the Enneagram. I'm this number, now what? Okay. So I hired a guy in Australia, one of my son's friends, who is a brilliant musician. And he did the score for these 12 little videos. And his music is very similar to that. And what is interesting about it is, so I sent him the link to Australia for him to watch The Wind, because he's only like, I don't know, mid-30s or something like that. He would never have watched.
What did he say? I'm interested.
So I'm waiting to hear. I just sent it to him last night, and God knows what time it is in Australia. But for me, I mean, the music was just, you know, really incredible because there were certain themes. So it was so dark. There was never any that was, it was so melancholic, you know, but it never kind of lifted. Did you notice? It was always
monotonous,
like
the wind,
like the living there.
Yeah.
It was when I think of silent movies, I always think of the piano player, the tinkling, the, you know, the runs, the, you know, and everything creating the, it's really leading the movie into the, you know, a good movie. When you have a great soundtrack, it sends the story home.
Totally.
And that's why if you ever watch the movie Elizabethtown, best soundtrack ever for a film, as far as I'm concerned. In fact, they make a, back in the day, they made those tapes. What do you call them? You know, where they create tapes. The girl, Kristen Dunst.
A mixtape.
Your mixtape. She makes a mixtape for, or I think it's Orlando Bloom.
Yeah.
Listen to on his drive home taking his father's ashes. And I want to make that road trip just so I can play that mixtape so I can experience. And I've gone to a lot of those places they stopped in, you know, that eatery in Memphis. I've been there. They stop at a place in Kansas. I just think that a movie can make or break a film. To Kill a Mockingbird, another one.
Okay, but you also said all those Betty Davis movies.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, can you, all right, I just blanked on who wrote all the music. It was the same musician for all her movies, for now Voyager, for
Well, we're watching that one coming up.
the blind, where she was blind, Dark Victories. Those soundtracks, oh my God. Oh my God. They were more than anything.
And people who do that, I am so in awe of somebody who can watch a film and create music that just makes the movie better. The Big Chill was another film that I saw years and years ago, but I played that soundtrack till I wore that 8-track tape out or whatever it was. It wasn't a CD, but there are certain ones. How the West was one. Oh my gosh, the music on that when they were going down the river, it just, so I think the choice they picked for that was perfect. It was very well done. So yeah, I want to watch some more Lillian Gish movies. I've watched a lot of Charlie Chaplin.
She has so many. That was what amazed me. I didn't know she was in that many movies. It was amazing. I didn't count them, but there are a lot of movies.
She's like the Betty Lee Crosby of film.
Really?
Betty Lee has put out another book since we just had her on the show. And I said, what is this, 25 in 11 years? She goes, no, just 24. Go, oh my gosh. And I watch a lot of Bollywood films, and Shah Rukh Khan would do 3 movies in a month. And I'm going, oh my God, the guy no wonder he's addicted to coffee. I can't even hardly imagine how those studios churned those films out so fast. And actually, the most haunting scene to me was the trains, and I watched another film recently that has one of the best cinematography I've ever seen of a train. And it's kind of like you're up above and it's at night, and you see the light of the train and you're following it through this woods, and the light flickers in and out of the trees. And it was called Mara, Maara. It's one of the best storytelling films I've ever seen in my life. I can't get anybody to watch it, and it's absolutely awesome. But we're watching a lot of great movies. We're also, by watching these films, I don't know about for you guys, but it's kind of expanding my world, because there's a lot of truths in the things that we're watching in these films. We can, just like there's studying history or researching, you can learn a lot of things. You can learn a lot of things watching films.
Right. I just wrote myself a note: never go to the bathroom in China.
Adult diapers.
Unless you're at a 4-star, 4 or 5-star hotel, you can.
Yes.
I'm looking for this Mara.
Maara.
M-A-A. Oh,
R-A. Mara. And it's a story about a little girl who is told a story when she's a little girl, and when she grows up, she goes in search of the artist who is in the story. And the whole movie is her searching for this man. And he's an artist. And I'm telling you, I get chills every time I've watched it like 3 times. And it's
the guy who plays Mara is some good looker.
Huh?
The guy who plays Mara is some good looker.
Well, that helps. But the girl's beautiful too. But there's 2 versions. There's a newer one, and that's the one I watched. And then the thing about India films, you also learn that they do a Tamil version, and then they do a
Captain Tamil.
No. You're so bad. Captain and Tamil. No, in India, there's different sections of the country that do have films. There's Bollywood, which is Bombay. Then there's Tollywood, which is Telugu. Tamil, and then there's Bollywood. They got a million of them, and I'm going, and they're kind of like the South and the North and the West Coast. They all have a different. So a lot of times they'll do one film with actors from Northern India, and they'll do the same film at the same time with Southern. It's crazy. And so it gets a little confusing, but there's two versions of Mara. I think it's pronounced Mara, and you want to watch the latest version. And I'm telling you, it's subtitle. A lot of people go, oh, it's subtitle. How can I watch a movie and read at the same time?
Well, before we transition out, though, I do want to recommend a documentary for you guys.
Okay.
You can find it on Netflix. It's called Misha and the Wolves. And it's based on a great literary deception that occurred, I don't know, about a decade ago, about a woman who represented herself to be a Holocaust survivor, who was Jewish. When it was all said and done, her narrative was completely false. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that reminds me of the story about the woman who was a Black activist.
Yeah.
And they found out she was not Black at all.
Right, she was Caucasian.
And Grey Wolf? Pierce Brosnan played the story of the Native American Indian man who was all for the rights of the Native Americans, and he wasn't Indian at all or Native American at all. It happens all the time, those stories. And I think, what makes somebody do that?
Well, so her story is a little bit more complex. So at the end of it, there's an interesting twist. I mean, there's certainly no forgiveness for her representing herself as a Holocaust survivor. She wasn't even Jewish. She was Catholic. But it's a fascinating story. Watch it. I watched it last night. I thought it was fascinating.
Oh, great. Well, I got back on Grace and Frankie. They've got a 7th season, and I love that show. I love Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin's relationship and their children. That show, how old is Jane Fonda? Isn't she like 80?
Close to, yeah.
Oh no, she's over way over.
Yeah.
Oh, she's
what
way
I really
over.
liked, I think I got into like the 3rd episode and I finally had to go to bed. But what I really liked about it, she has a circle on her scalp now in the 3rd episode that's silver hair, and she's letting her perfectly colored hair grow out.
She's 83. That woman is 83 years old.
I need to know her surgeon.
Listen, the woman was built like a brick shit house before she even started. It's like Sophia Loren and Raquel Welch. They started out with figures that were just beyond, comparison.
So I have to tell you a Jane Fonda story. So she lived here in Atlanta for a while, and she had a nonprofit called GCAP that my nonprofit, Easter Seals North Georgia, partnered with. So I actually had an opportunity to meet her on a couple.
Oh, you didn't? I would love to meet her.
But she also, Timothy and I lived in Inman Park. We had a loft there for quite a few years, and she lived not too terribly far away in a loft. So she actually worked out at the same gym that Timothy and I worked out at.
Yeah, I know she.
And we worked out very early in the morning, and she would be there. But so she was allowed, because she is to let her. She had, I forget what her dog's name was at that time, but her dog was there at the gym, just sort of running around loose all over the floor. And so she would be there in the mornings with her sunglasses on. Of course, it was when she was getting ready to reemerge onto the screen prior to filming for Monster-in-Law. So she was, trying to get herself back into this awesome shape. But there was this, I would never really bother her in the mornings. I would just sort of like nod over, and she had her sunglasses, of course, very bosomy at that point. I think that she had not had her implants taken out yet. So there was this gentleman, this guy who was in the squat rack, and he was making these orgasmic sounds when he was lifting the weight, those guys that make all the ruckus. So he would go like, and then across the gym, Jane Fonda would go, oh. and then he would go, oh, and she would go, oh.
Oh,
It was amazing. And he never realized that Jane Fonda was mocking him, but it was awesome.
and I know you cracked up.
Oh, I did. I mean, I was mesmerized. I was just watching this exchange. But they also filmed a 60 minutes interview with her at one of our facilities. And I was there in the chaos. And so she went into, and she had to do it for some reason, she had to change outfits in between. So we were in the center manager's office. She didn't even think twice about it. She just pulled her top off. So I'm there in this office with Jane Fonda in her bra, and she looks amazing. And I'm like, oh my God, Barbarella. I mean, she really.
And how old was she when that happened?
This was, I don't know. It was less than 20 years ago. I don't know, maybe 15, whenever, right before Monster in Law came out.
So, gee, she was only early 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stunning.
Dang.
And the woman knows how to make an entrance. When we were doing a ribbon cutting, and there was an auditorium full of people, and we were unveiling this partnership that she was funding in some of our early education and care classrooms. And she was, in my opinion, intentionally late and just made this fabulous entrance because they had them sitting up on stage, the individuals that were all engaged in this specific program. And of course, she came in late, walked from the back all the way up to the front, up the stairs and onto the stage. And of course, everyone is, raptly, she's holding everyone raptly, in her attention. So it was amazing. So it was cool. It was good to sort of briefly be in her orbit.
Yeah.
So she's out in California now because they're doing all those shows, but she is letting her hair go silver white.
Looks good.
She has an egg shape and then it's just like perfectly all these different colors. And I love that show, but I love Lily Tomlin's clothing style and her statement necklaces. And she goes, it's all about the layering. She's just, and
but I have to tell you,
go ahead,
Kathy. So Lily Tomlin's art in the show.
Yes.
There's these weird
vaginas.
Well, no, it's and figures and people. I know the artist. I have her work in my house. She's in Chicago. And
really?
she got so lucky. Can you believe that, Nancy Rosen?
Oh, sure.
And they said, this is what we want Lily Tomlin's art to be. And all those pictures in her studio and the house that, I mean, I don't know if they buy them or just rent them. I don't know.
No, they buy them. Years ago, I had Linda Bloodworth Tomlinson call me after I got featured in the Los Angeles Times. And it's quite a story. Anyway, she came and spent a week with me. And when she went back, she goes, I'm working on a film with Lily Tomlin. It's about a family like Dallas that own a car dealership in Kansas City. And she's the matriarch of the family run business. And she said, and I was telling her about the Pulpwood Queens and how you have this annual girlfriend weekend and that you have this big hairball. And she goes, Lily wanted me to ask you and we did parades back in the day. We had literary parades where I put all the authors in convertibles and cars, and we went up and down the main street. Nobody ever came. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. But anyway, she said, Lily wants to know that if she comes, could she be Queen Esther and the queen of the hairball? And I said, if Lily Tomlin wants to come to Girlfriend Weekend, yes, I will make her the hairball queen. And she goes, well, I'm going to get back. And she called me back. Linda called me back. She goes, you won't believe what she did. She went and I think she broke her ankle or did something. She's in a cast. The show never did air. She never came to Girlfriend Weekend, but it makes a great story, just kind of like the Jane Fonda things. But when you think about people that run into these people, they're just like you and me. you know, they get a little bit of I've worked with a lot of like, you know, Rue McClanahan from the Golden Girls came and spent some time with me. And you want to know a diva? She loved me, but oh my God, the things that she did, he called me on the phone and said, Kathy, I'm Rue McClanahan. Do you know who I am? And I said, yes, ma'am. I go, you are a Broadway star that also, you know, went on to television iconic fame with the Golden Girls. She goes, well, you do know who I am. And I go, well, I live in Jefferson, Texas, but I've been a few places. And she said, well, my son in Austin sent me a newspaper story that you were in, and I have a book coming out. I want to come and visit you. And I said, well, come on, let's have you come. Well, and that I could write a whole chapter in the book. I want to write a book on the stories about the celebrity encounters because they're incredible. But what happened is when I took her and her publicist back to the Cadillac dealership in Marshall, Texas, to pick up the Cadillac, they were going to drive back to Austin. They said, oh, I'm sorry, but it's not quite ready yet. She goes, what do you mean it's not ready? We booked this months ago. And the guy said, well, we had to locate the car and now we're just now getting it washed and vacuumed for you. And she goes, who are you? She goes, are you the owner? And he said, no, my father owns the business. And she goes, and is your father here? No, ma'am, he's not. And by then, everybody in the dealership is watching him and her. And I'm standing there going, oh, crap. And she goes, well, let me tell you. She goes, this is not a way to run a business because my New York publishing house booked this months ago. And she goes, if you don't have that Cadillac here within the next business, I am going to let you know what I really think. And the guy goes, yes, ma'am. And he went and was making phone calls and everybody's watching. And then she did the weirdest thing. So we're in there, there's like the dealership, and then there's this long drive-through, double drive-through, and then there's another building. And this woman was out there sweeping with just a push broom, you know, that whole driveway. And she goes, look at that, Kathy. She goes, all these people sitting around on their asses, not doing a damn thing. But that little girl out there is sweeping that driveway with a broom. She goes, come with me. And she picked up one of those real fancy Cadillac brochures, the big thick one. She just picked it up. I think you have to pay for them, but she just picked it up and walked out. Nobody said a word. And she said, come with me. And she walked over to her and she goes, excuse me. She goes, I see that you're doing a lot of hard work here, some really good work. And she goes, oh, yes, ma'am. And she goes, do you know who I am? She goes, yes, ma'am. She goes, you're Rue McClanahan and you hail from Ardmore, just outside of Ardmore, Oklahoma, because I'm from Oklahoma and I'm from the little town that you were born and raised in. She goes, you've got to be kidding me. And she goes, no, you're in our museum. And she goes, is that right? She goes, well, I've been watching you. And she goes, I don't know what you're getting paid here, but I'm sure it's not enough because you're the only one working. So I would like to write a personal note to you and sign it for you to have. And what is your name? And I can't remember what her name was, but she wrote like all this stuff and flourishing pages. And by then I'm looking at everybody in the glass offices are watching, and she presents it to her and she goes, you are a wonderful human being, and I commend you for the good job that you're doing. And then she turned to me and she said, now, Kathy, let's go see if that car's ready. And it was ready when we got up there. And, you know, she kept calling me and wanting me to come to Manhattan and meet her husband and all this stuff. She lived in a penthouse and I never did. And then she passed away. But, you know, all these stories of like your Jane Fonda story and these stories, they give you, you know, she's just a little girl from Oklahoma and she went on to become famous. And man, she must have been a spitfire though. Can you imagine? I can't. And Jane Fonda, I'd love to meet her. But now we're on to the next film. Is there anything more we want to discuss from The Wind? Have we covered it all?
I think we can cut from the wind.
Yeah, it's gone. And then next week we're watching.
Oh my gosh, I can't hang on just a second. Let me pull my notes.
You picked this bunch, so
I did, and I can't remember, but I will tell you in just a second.
I was really excited of it.
Now Voyager is next.
Yes.
Yes, my favorite.
I know. We're the Betty Davis fans of all
I am.
time. I love her. So now Voyager is on our list.
Oh God, you gotta have this. We're gonna have to do our hair up and be like we're on a boat, and then they smoke the cigarette together.
I'll have to get that cigarette lighter out again. I've
Yeah.
got it here somewhere. I read
Who's going to be the before Betty Davis with the eyebrows?
Oh, maybe I'll do it. I don't have any problem doing it. She was so, that's my sister's favorite movie. I've got to get Karen to jump in on this because she would love it. Have you seen the movie, Kathy? Now Voyager?
Like so many old movies, I've seen parts of it, but I've never seen the whole thing beginning to end.
Well, it's that mother. You've got to watch this film because
She's the mother of mothers.
I really related to that film when I was growing up as a teenager. I really related to that story, but it has a very interesting twist. And Betty Davis, she's just the bomb, man. I wish she was still around because think of the movies. She's like Barbara Stanwyck. These women, man, they just went for it. And
Broads.
I love it. I love it when they just
And
really
she was another one like Lillian Gish. I met her and everything, and I had this big
I
sign.
know, and so
Yeah, it's huge. But I have to tell you, teeny. I'm not even 5'2". I'm 5'1.5". She was more. I mean, she was old, but she had very teeny, really teeny. But a presence like.
Well, and you know what's interesting too, Ruthie, is that I think the last film that Lillian Gish did was with Betty Davis, The Whales of August in the 80s.
Oh, I'm going to watch that tonight.
Oh, I love that.
What do you think it's on?
Oh, I'm sure you can find it easily. Just do a search on one of the film apps.
It's so beautiful.
Whales of August. And they were and I remember hearing stories of the filming of that. Of course, they were both very frail at that point in time. And there were some scenes filmed in the sand, and they had to have some of the men on the set, some of the crew, lay on the ground and hold them by the ankles so they wouldn't fall over.
Yeah.
On the beach.
Oh, that was such a beautiful film. Oh, thank you for reminding me of that film. I need to see it again.
Okay, The Whales of August, and the other one was Misha and the Wolves.
Yes, so Misha and the Wolves is a wonderful documentary. I thought it was fascinating. It's just a wonderful story of literary deception.
Have you seen that Osage? Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, the
August.
The August of Osage County or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a play, I think.
It started as a play. Guy here in Chicago with Steppenwolf Theater, and he's a member of the company there, and he wrote the play, and then it was here, and then it went on.
Well, I'm hoping that more people that we get on board, the more movie suggestions that we'll receive, because I get to a point where I go on Netflix and seen it. Oh, I haven't seen The Tree. Oh my gosh, that was such a powerful. That'll be coming up. But you guys, it's late. This is my third event of the day. As you can tell, my hair is totally windblown. It looks pretty much like hers.
It looks exactly like hers.
Not quite long enough though.
So can we end with each of us doing a silent movie take? Yes, there it is. And then don't forget.
Gone with the Wind, y'all.
And we talked about bathrooms and we did not talk about the other metaphor for the wind.
Oh no. Okay. Stop. We're done. Out of here. Bye, y'all. We'll see you next time. Thank you all for joining, especially Kathy.
Kathy,
I loved
Keep
it.
it real.
I loved it.
come back.
So much fun. We just laugh. We just have a good time. I love Saturday night. Thank you all for being with me.
Oh,
See you
thank
next time.
Thank
night,
you for
everybody.
such a great time, the three of you. Thank you. Bye.
you. We had great